I still remember the exact moment my entire world flipped upside down. It was Thanksgiving dinner, the dining room packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years, the smell of turkey and stuffing filling the air. Everyone was laughing, passing dishes, the usual chaos of a family gathering. I was sitting between my cousin Jake and my boyfriend Marcus, trying to enjoy what I thought would be a normal holiday. That's when my great-aunt Margaret cleared her throat. Now, Aunt Margaret wasn't just any family member. She was a retired federal judge, sharp as a tack at 78, with a presence that could silence a room without her saying a word. When she stood up at the head of the table, everyone stopped mid-conversation. "Sarah," she said, her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach drop. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." I set down my fork, confused. "Of course, Aunt Margaret. What is it? Have you been managing your investment portfolio well? The one your grandmother left you?" The room went completely silent. I could feel every pair of eyes turning toward me. I laughed nervously. "I'm sorry, what portfolio?" "Grandma Rose didn't leave me anything. She passed away when I was in college. I had to take out loans to finish school." Aunt Margaret's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She looked across the table at my Uncle David and his wife Claire. "Is that so?" Uncle David's face had gone white. Aunt Claire suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. "David," Aunt Margaret continued, her voice taking on that courtroom edge I'd heard stories about, "would you like to explain to Sarah about the $1.2 million investment portfolio that her grandmother specifically left in her name 8 years ago?" The fork I'd been holding clattered against my plate. $1.2 million? 8 years? That's ridiculous. Uncle David finally spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. Mother left her estate to be divided among the family. There was no specific portfolio for Sarah. I have the will right here. Aunt Margaret pulled out a document from her purse, notarized and witnessed. Rose Hartwell left her entire investment portfolio, valued at approximately $1.2 million at the time of her death, to her granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell. You and Claire were named as trustees until Sarah turned 25. I turned 25 3 years ago. My hands started trembling. I looked at Uncle David, the man who'd driven me to college move-in day, who told me repeatedly that I was making poor financial decisions by pursuing my MBA, who'd lectured me about being more practical, the man who'd watched me struggle with student loans and never said a word. "This is a misunderstanding," Aunt Claire jumped in. "The money was placed in a family trust. It's been carefully managed for everyone's benefit, including Sarah's." "Interesting," Aunt Margaret said coolly, "because the investment firm has no record of any distributions to Sarah. In fact, they have records of the portfolio being liquidated piece by piece over the past 8 years. The final stocks were sold last month." The room erupted. My mother gasped. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Cousin Jake grabbed my hand under the table. I couldn't breathe. I'd spent the last decade eating ramen, working 3 jobs through business school, sleeping in my car between shifts to save on rent. I'd graduated with $180,000 in student debt. And the whole time, there was over $1 million that was supposed to be mine? Where did the money go? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Uncle David's jaw clenched. "Sarah, you were 20 years old when Mother passed. You were in no position to manage that kind of wealth. We made the responsible choice to steal from her?" My father's voice cut through. "To watch my daughter nearly break herself trying to get through school while you two were living off her inheritance?" "We didn't steal anything," Aunt Claire's voice went shrill. "We had full legal authority as trustees. We made investments, managed the portfolio. For whose benefit?" Aunt Margaret's voice was ice. "Because I have copies of the transactions. A $400,000 beach house in the Outer Banks purchased 8 years ago. Registered to David and Claire Hartwell. A complete kitchen renovation. $85,000. European vacations every summer. A Tesla. Should I continue? I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else. This couldn't be real. My uncle, who'd always seemed like the responsible one in the family, who everyone respected, had stolen over $1 million from me. You had a legal obligation, Aunt Margaret continued, to preserve and grow that portfolio until Sarah reached 25, then transfer it to her control. Instead, you spent it on yourselves. We were going to pay it back, Uncle David's voice cracked. We had investments that were supposed to mature, but the market. The market? I found my voice, and I barely recognized it. It was cold, hard. You gambled with my inheritance and lost? Sarah, honey, you have to understand. Aunt Claire reached across the table toward me. I jerked back. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Tarkus's hand was on my shoulder, steady and grounding. I took a breath. I want to know everything, I said, looking at Aunt Margaret. How did you find out? Aunt Margaret sat back down, pulling out a folder. Your grandmother and I were close friends for 60 years. She told me about the will, made me promise to check in on things. I didn't think I'd need to verify that her own son would honor her wishes, but something felt off last year when David suddenly started pressuring other family members to sell inherited property. I hired a forensic accountant. She slid papers across the table to me. I picked them up with shaking hands. Transaction records, bank statements, property deeds. It was all there. Every dollar they'd stolen, documented. The portfolio was worth $1.2 million when you inherited it, Aunt Margaret explained. With proper management over 8 years, conservative investments, it should be worth approximately $2.1 million today. Instead, there's $47,000 left in the account. $2.1 million. I could have been debt-free. Could have started my career without the crushing weight of student loans. Could have helped my parents when Dad lost his job 2 years ago. You watched me struggle, I said, looking directly at Uncle David. I called you crying when I couldn't afford my textbooks. You told me to get a job at Starbucks. You knew. You knew the whole time there was money that was supposed to be mine, and you just watched. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? My voice rose. Explain it to me. Make me understand how you rationalize stealing from your own niece. Uncle David's face crumpled. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. We were in debt, he finally admitted. Bad investments. Before your grandmother passed, we thought we could fix it, use the portfolio temporarily, replace it before you turned 25. But everything we tried failed. The market crashed in 2008. We lost everything. And then we were in too deep to come clean. So you just kept taking, I said flatly. For 8 years. You went on vacation to Paris while I was sleeping in my car to save rent money. Aunt Claire was crying now. We're so sorry, Sarah. We never meant for it to go this far. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 years of my life. My mother spoke up for the first time. David, how could you? She's your niece. She's family. Family, I repeated bitterly. I looked around the table at all the relatives who'd gathered for Thanksgiving, wondering who else knew, who else had watched me struggle and said nothing. Uncle David buried his face in his hands. What do you want from us? We don't have the money anymore. We can set up a payment plan. A payment plan? Aunt Margaret's laugh was sharp. David, you don't seem to understand the gravity of this situation. This isn't a personal loan. This is theft, breach of fiduciary duty, fraud. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Yes, we're ready for you now. Who are you calling? Aunt Claire's voice went high with panic. The FBI. The doorbell rang before anyone could react. My father went to answer it and returned with 2 federal agents in suits. Special Agent Torres, Special Agent Kim, Aunt Margaret introduced them. They've been working with me for the past 6 months, building a case. I stared at her. 6 months. She'd known for 6 months and hadn't told me. Agent Torres stepped forward, badge out. David Hartwell, Claire Hartwell, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. Everything after that happened in slow motion. Uncle David tried to run, actually tried to leave through the back door, but Agent Kim was faster. Aunt Claire collapsed into sobs, begging, saying she had children to think about. Their kids, my cousins, Emily and Brandon, sat frozen in shock. The agents read them their rights. Handcuffs clicked into place. My mother was crying. My father had his arm around her. Marcus squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I needed that anchor to reality. This was really happening. As they led Uncle David and Aunt Claire out, Uncle David looked back at me. Sarah, please, don't let them do this. We're family. I met his eyes and didn't say a word. After they left, the dining room stayed silent. 20 relatives, and no one knew what to say. The turkey was getting cold. Someone's baby started crying upstairs. Aunt Margaret sat down next to me, her hand covering mine. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I needed to build an airtight case first. If I'd tipped our hand too early, they could have hidden assets, destroyed evidence. I understand, I said, and I meant it. What happens now? Now, you have choices to make. She pulled out another set of documents. I've been working with the forensic accountant. We can trace most of their assets. The beach house, the cars, investments they made. There's a strong case for asset forfeiture and restitution. It won't be the full amount, but we can recover a significant portion. Agent Torres stayed behind after his partner left with my uncle and aunt. He sat across from me, his expression kind. Miss Mitchell, I want you to know that this case is solid. We have 8 years of documented transactions, emails where they discuss the inheritance, witness testimony. Your great-aunt has been very thorough. How long have you been investigating? I asked. 6 months officially. Judge Hartwell came to us with her findings, and we took it from there. This isn't just about the money, though that's significant. It's about a pattern of financial elder abuse and exploitation of trust relationships. What's the likely outcome? Federal wire fraud charges carry up to 20 years. Realistically, given the amount involved and the duration of the fraud, we're looking at 5 to 8 years in prison for each of them. Plus, mandatory restitution, 5 to 8 years. My uncle and aunt in federal prison, their kids losing their parents. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt nothing at all. The Thanksgiving dinner everyone had been looking forward to was ruined. People started leaving. Awkward goodbyes. No one knowing what to say to me. Emily and Brandon left with their grandmother, both of them in tears. I felt bad for them. They were innocent in this. By the time it was just my parents, Marcus, Aunt Margaret, and me, I finally allowed myself to break down. My mother held me while I sobbed. 8 years of struggle and stress and exhaustion pouring out of me all at once. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Aunt Margaret, when I could finally speak again. In the last 6 months, why didn't you warn me? She looked older than I'd ever seen her. Because I needed you to be genuinely surprised when I confronted them. If you'd known, even subconsciously, it might have shown. David is shrewd, he would have noticed. And if I'd known, I realized, I might have confronted them myself and ruined the case. Exactly. I'm sorry I had to deceive you, Sarah. But I promised your grandmother I would look after you. This was the only way I could keep that promise. The next few weeks were a blur. The forensic accountant walked me through everything, every transaction, every lie, every dollar. It was worse than I'd thought. They hadn't just stolen the original $1.2 million. They'd been receiving dividend payments, capital gains, all of it flowing into their accounts instead of mine. The beach house alone was worth $650,000 now. There were luxury cars, jewelry, investment accounts they'd opened in their names using my inheritance money. Altogether, the accountant estimated we could recover about $1.4 million in assets. Not the full $2.1 million the portfolio should have been worth, but enough to change my life. The hardest part was dealing with the rest of the family. Some relatives took my side immediately. Others thought I was being cruel to pursue criminal charges against my own uncle and aunt. They made a mistake, Cousin Rachel told me. Do you really need to destroy their entire lives over money? They destroyed 8 years of my life, I reminded her. They watched me struggle and did nothing. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice they made every single day for 8 years. The trial took 11 months to prepare. During that time, I had to sit for depositions, meetings with prosecutors, review endless financial documents. It was exhausting, but also oddly empowering. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. Marcus stood by me through all of it. On the days I wanted to give up, to let them plead out to lesser charges just to make it all go away, he reminded me what was at stake. This isn't just about you, he said. How many other people have they done this to? How many other people might they do it to if they're not stopped? He was right. The investigation uncovered that Uncle David had also been managing his elderly mother-in-law's finances and had taken $40,000 from her account for investment opportunities that never materialized. The trial itself lasted 3 weeks. I had to testify. had to sit there while their defense attorney tried to paint me as a spoiled young woman who didn't understand the complexities of financial management. It took everything in me not to scream, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Uncle David got 7 years in federal prison. Aunt Claire got 5. Full restitution ordered. All their assets seized and liquidated. I thought I'd feel triumphant when the verdict came in. Instead, I just felt tired. The restitution process took another year. Between the seized assets and forced repayment plan, I ultimately recovered $1.6 million. Not the full amount I should have had, but more than I dared to hope for after learning what they'd done. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans. All $180,000 of them. I sat at my computer, transferred the money, and watched the balance hit zero. I cried for an hour straight. The second thing I did was pay off my parents' mortgage. They'd taken out a second mortgage when Dad lost his job, and they'd been struggling. I handed them the paid-off deed on Christmas, exactly 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything. The third thing I did was set up a trust fund for Emily and Brandon, my cousins. They were innocent victims in this too. The trust would mature when they turned 25, and it would be managed by an independent trustee. Not me. I couldn't bear to be in that position. But I wanted them to have opportunities, to not be punished for their parents' crimes. With what was left, I invested it properly. Conservative, diversified, exactly what my grandmother would have wanted. I kept working at the consulting firm where I'd started after my MBA. The money gave me security, but I didn't want to just live off it. I wanted to build something. Aunt Margaret passed away a year after the trial. She was 80 years old, and everyone said she lived a full life, but I knew better. The stress of the investigation, of turning on her own nephew, had taken its toll. At her funeral, I gave the eulogy. She taught me, I said, that family is about integrity, not blood. That real love means doing the hard thing, the painful thing, when it's right. She could have looked the other way. She could have decided it wasn't worth the family drama. But she didn't. She fought for justice, even when it cost her. I meant every word. 3 years after that Thanksgiving, I'm 31 now. Marcus and I got married last spring. We bought a house, not too big, but ours. I still work, still build my career, still save and invest carefully. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pursuing charges against my uncle and aunt. If I wish I'd just taken the money quietly and moved on. I don't, because this was never just about money. It was about principle. It was about the fact that people who claim to love you don't get to steal your future and expect forgiveness. It was about standing up and saying that what they did was wrong, and that there are consequences for betraying trust. Uncle David will be released next year. He's written me letters from prison, apologizing, explaining, asking for forgiveness. I haven't responded to any of them. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll be ready to process that anger and betrayal into something resembling forgiveness. But not yet. Aunt Claire got out on good behavior after 3 years. I heard through the family grapevine that she's working as a cashier at Target, living in a small apartment, still paying restitution. Part of me feels bad for her. Part of me thinks about 20-year-old me sleeping in my car between shifts and feels nothing. Emily and Brandon are doing okay. They're in college now, working their way through like I did. We exchange texts occasionally. They understand why I did what I did, even if it hurt them. That means more to me than they know. My grandmother Rose died when I was 20, before I really got to know her as an adult. But I know she left me that money because she believed in me. She saw something in me worth investing in. She wanted me to have opportunities, to build a life, to not struggle the way she had. Uncle David and Aunt Claire tried to take that away from me. They tried to steal not just money, but my grandmother's final gift, her last act of love. I think about her sometimes, wonder what she would think of how everything turned out. I hope she'd be proud. Not because I sent her son to prison, I don't think any mother wants that, but because I stood up for myself, because I didn't let betrayal break me, because I took what was left of her gift and built something meaningful with it. I visit her grave every year on her birthday. I bring flowers, tell her about my life, about the career I've built, about Marcus, about the future we're planning. I tell her that her money changed my life, but not in the way she might have expected. It taught me that the people who should protect you are sometimes the ones who hurt you most. That family isn't a shield against betrayal, that trust is earned, not given, and once broken, it can never fully be repaired. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive betrayal, can push through the pain, can come out the other side intact, that I have the courage to do hard things, to make difficult choices, to stand alone if I have to. The money is secure now, growing steadily, giving me options and security I never dreamed I'd have. But the real inheritance my grandmother left me wasn't the dollars. It was the knowledge of what I'm capable of when pushed to my limit. And that's worth more than any amount they could have stolen.